Today's story was written by Reddit user Silver200061. Healer! Healer! Men rushed into the tent again, urgently shouting, followed by the stretcher bearers. Euphrantis was used to this already. These few years of war had hardened her for these situations, and she replied with her calmer but still loud voice over the consistent screams and shouts in the packed field hospital. "Here, put him down here." The group of human warriors and camp followers helped the stretcher bearers to slowly put down the patient on a makeshift operating table, still bloody from the last patient. It was a young Savanian knight, barely over his 20s. His helmet was already removed, and from the state of his armour and face, she knew things were terrible. The previously gold-ornated steel had now been battered to scrap metal. His right pauldron was gone, exposing a few strands of fabrics that were once his armouring doublet, and the shoulder underneath was a bloody mess. His face was an unhealthy pale, and covered in horrific wounds. Lips darkened, blood was seeping out of his nose and mouth with every weak breath. "Specific condition?" she asked as she checked his pulse, half knowing the answer already. Through a panting voice, one of his retinues answered, "Quicksilver poisoning." The 9th one she had seen today. "Please, do what you can to save our lord," the squire pleaded. A sudden surge of rage almost overcame Euphrantis. Her hands clutched into a fist, attempting her best to contain it. "I will. Now get out, all of you. You will only get in the way." "But—" "Out, now! I don't have time for this, nor does your master." With reluctance, the group of retinue left. Euphrantis began to shout out orders for her assistants. Everyone was quick-paced. There was no time for delicacy now. They had to cut the leather armour strips first to treat the physical wound, and by the looks of the battered armour and blood leaking from the armour joints, it must be bad. At the same time, Euphrantis prepared the proper healing spells and potions for detoxification. With quicksilver poisoning, every second counts. When they finally cut loose his armour and removed the cuirass, even Euphrantis gasped. His body was covered in every wound possible: cuts, tears, bruises, dislocations, broken bones, and burns. Not to mention a heat stroke from continuous fighting in a suit of metal. Euphrantis could not imagine what he had been through, whatever hell this knight had endured and survived. She immediately began chanting the required spells to stop the bleeding, while her assistant tried to clean the wound to assist with the healing and feed the knight water and an antitoxin potion. But nothing was working. The young knight's wounds were too severe. The quicksilver had likely done too much damage to his body for it to heal. Even with the best Carithian healing magic and potions, his pulse and breath grew weaker with every moment that passed. No, stay with me, you human bastard," Euphrantis muttered under her breath. "I'm not letting you die here, not after whatever hell you have come through." Euphrantis stood closer, putting her hands closer to his body, pouring more mana and psychic focus into her chants, hoping that the healing magic will drag the young human knight back from the gates of death. Suddenly, the young knight took Euphrantis by surprise and grabbed her arm. With the strength that a dying human should not have, he dragged Euphrantis closer to himself and spoke. Where are the Carithians? Did the civilians, did they retreat successfully?" He struggled with every word, wheezing breath between his weak speech. Yes, they did." Euphrantis put her other hand on his and answered, "You should rest now. You have suffered terrible wounds." Good. The edge of his mouth jerked slightly upwards as he relaxed his head back, his brows no longer twitching with pain. The young knight's voice slowly faded away with a relieved and satisfied tone. And then his breath ceased. The grip on Euphrantus's forearm loosened. The human's hand slowly slipped away, and his arm dropped down the edge of the makeshift operating table. Euphrantus sat by the bank of the small river around the camp. Her shift had ended, and she was relieved by another healer prima. She was tired, but she could not bring herself to rest. She looked down and slowly rubbed her right forearm. Though the finger marks had long since faded, the gripping sensation of the young human knight still lingered. Grand Healer Euphrantus. It was the human surgeon Aegineta. She was exhausted as well, with the same fatigued and bloodied face that Euphrantus had seen many times. Mind if I sit here too? Euphrantus shook her head and turned back toward the river again. Aegineta sat down slowly with a grunt. She rubbed her hands together, trying to formulate something to say, and eventually, she let out a deep breath and spoke. I've heard about Sir Bayard. You've done your best. Do not feel bad about it. Euphrantus knew the surgeon was merely trying to comfort her, and she was grateful about it, but that odd sense of anger began to creep up again, and she couldn't help herself but to ask, why do you let them use it? I beg your pardon? The human surgeon's head turned, her expression clearly confused. The quicksilver. Why do you let them use it? Euphrantus repeated again, this time with a bit more agitation. No one let them use it, the surgeon answered, with an awkward chuckle. They are knights. They let themselves use whatever they want. But did you not warn them about it? That it will kill them? Oh, I did. We all did, in fact. Every scholar did. But they do not care. Though this explanation did not quite quell Euphrantus's anger, it did shock her. Listen, Grand Healer, you might think of us as warmongering lunatics that have no regard for ourselves or our people. The human surgeon's tone began to become more serious, and she turned her whole body towards Euphrantus, looking directly in her eyes. We have no magic of your kind, the dexterity of the elves, the strength of the giants, nor the sorcery of the coprons. We are human, and what we are is what we have, and whatever we can utilize, we will do so. This is how we survive. This is how we win wars. These knights come to fight for your people because they believe it is righteous and just, and they will do whatever it takes to win, as it is the only way. Whatever it takes, no matter the cost. 5 hours ago, River Kafla. Sir Bayard! Sir Bayard! Maestro Spa has ordered a general retreat. The left had disintegrated. The Terrico can't hold them. What of the refugees? The Carithians have not finished the crossing yet. Sir Bayard of Demar asked, meanwhile casually dispatching a Copron cataphract with his poleaxe. The Maestro said we can't risk the entire Terrico. Whoever is left, only the saints can have them now. The messenger answered in haste, then gave a quick salute and rode off, racing to relay the order. Damn, Bayard muttered under his breath. Terrico de la Muralla de Chayo had been engaged in battle for more than 5 hours non-stop, just to keep the Kafla bridgehead open for the Carithians refugees to retreat. Now that they were so close to salvation, their saviour would abandon them to their fates. This I cannot do. I will not bear this shame to abandon the innocent to these savages. Master Galileo, tell me how much time I have left for the runes. The knight turned to his mage retinue. Sir, I must warn you that if you... But before the mage could finish his protest, the young knight interrupted him. Just tell me how much time. The mage retinue reached out his hand and placed it on Sir Bayard's armour, momentarily closing his eyes to concentrate. My liege, You have approximately 1 hour left with this amount of quicksilver, but I must insist, sir, that prolonged usage of will kill me, I am aware, Master Galileo. The runic circuit activated. The runes etched in an old Savanian and linear circuit glowed. Sir Bayard could feel power pulsing through him as mana flowed throughout the armour, accompanied with a metallic sweetness in his mouth. Master Galileo, tell the batteries under no circumstance they should stop firing and retreat unless the final line of the Spadone Vetrano had failed, and inform the maestro I will buy the time for the refugees. His retinues bowed and hurried to their orders. There were no farewell words, they need none of such things. Bayard lowered his visor and readied his poleaxe. Here we go, then. With a kick that shook the ground, he propelled himself into a great leap, crossing 100 paces within seconds, and smashed into a densely packed copronite formation. The impact killed a dozen men outright. The rest blew away like dolls. Sir Bayard swung his poleaxe with augmented strength. The hammerhead caved in armour and turned copron flesh into tenderized meat and mushed paste. Then something hit. Immense heat was what Bayard felt first, followed by the concussive blow. Something with the strength of a bull impacted him and knocked the wind out of him. The taste of metallic sweetness in his mouth felt stronger, now with the addition of blood. He must keep moving. He must buy time for the retreat. 5 more minutes. Just 5 more minutes will do. His legs were still moving, pushing him forward. The armour must have held, and the runes were still functional, feeding both the armour and him power. Ignoring the clang of arrows uselessly glancing off his armour, Bayard concentrated through his narrow visor, trying to locate the source of the attack. He caught the glimpse of a red light with the corner of his vision slit. He instinctively blocked with his poleaxe. Years of training kicked in as muscle memory took over. The poleaxe exploded in splinters of wood and steel shards. It was a group of mages, 200 paces away, already chanting for the next attack spell. Then the ground around their position erupted, throwing up dirt and pink mist. Body parts flaked around as Savanian hunter-killer gun batteries precisely executed their anti-sorcerer tactics. But the salvo did not kill them all. There's one left. With a roar, Bayard threw the broken shaft in his hand. The air boomed as he accelerated towards his target. The wooden pole impacted the shield bearers guarding the mage and smashed right through them, sent them flying, then hit the chanting mage with so much force his body was ripped in half. There was no pause between his movement. Sir Bayard was already moving. He drew his blade and leapt forward again, curving his way through iron and sinew. Just 5 more minutes. Elite cataphracts and Janizar guards came for him, axe blades and mace flashing with armour-piercing sorcery, specifically to counter a fully armoured human knight. God, he had caught the attention of the enemy now. Steel clashed and blows were exchanged. Rings and metal flakes flew in all directions as enchanted chainmail and lamella were bashed through with sheer brute force. Sir Bayard gripped his longsword on the blade, using its crossguard and pommel as a temporary hammer as cuts were of little effect. Just 5 more minutes. These creatures were but crude imitations of him, heavily armoured head to toe, and went through vigorous training for sure, but they were no knights. Sir Bayard was born into war. His sole purpose was war. To them, this was an occupation. To him, this is what he was made for. It was part of his nature, as if breathing air. But he was but one, and they were many. And the poison began to drag him down. Bayard forgot when he lost the sense of smell and taste, or the sensation of pain. His hands were numb, and he struggled to breathe, and he had to consistently fight against the urge to remove his helm. Just 5 more minutes. The golem towered over him, with strength that could shatter fortress walls. Its giant rocky digit curled into a fist and swung. It caught Sir Bayard in the right shoulder as he attempted to dodge the blow. It sent him flying, whirled in the air and crashed into the ground. There was no pain, but a sense of tiredness dragged Bayard down, as if something dropped a mountain over him. His body was so heavy, his armor was so heavy, his eyelids were so heavy. His mind was murky, and he could not even comprehend the ringing in his ears anymore. Where am I? I am tired. I must rest. No. The slam of the golem's feet snapped him awake. I must fight. Bayard could not sense his right arm anymore. Broken, cut away, and his vision was a mix of blurred images. But it does not matter. Now he must stand, to stand and fight. He clenched his teeth and attempted to push his body up. The runic circuit no longer glowed as brightly, and struggled to push the battered armor and broken knight up. Move, Bayard, you must move. If you will not fight, who will fight? If you do not stand, who will stand? You are the exemplar. You are the bastion. You must fight for those who can't. You are a knight. He roared and lifted himself up, staggering in the process. His blade was no longer with him, so he drew the dagger. Just 5 more minutes. The world was grey and silent. Bayard laid beside the golem's head, his dagger embedded deep in its face. He could no longer move. Truly this time, he felt weightless yet heavy, as if his body no longer belonged to himself. The heat that burnt him slowly died down, and it started to get colder and colder, and although the sensation of pain slowly slipped back, oddly not to the degree that was unbearable. A small breeze blew across his face. He did not know when his visor was smashed away, or perhaps he opened it himself. He did not remember, actually. He could not remember many things. But one thing, one question did linger in his mind. Did the refugees cross the river? He hoped that they did. He hoped the maestro of the Terrico did listen to his retinues. He hoped he had done enough. He hoped he did buy them enough time. Just 5 more minutes. Darkness slowly crept up from the corners of his eyes. Bayard tried to fight it, but his mind had begun to drift as well. He could not focus anymore. Then darkness, coldness, and silence.